Medicare and Social Security were promises that we as a people have made to each other about the kind of country we are and the kind of society we want to live in. And I don't know about you, Arizona, but I want to live in an America that guarantees health care to every person.
AOC and Bernie Sanders have been touring around the country together to spread a progressive message and to fight back against Donald Trump's 2.0 administration. Tim Miller and Sam Stein of the Bulwark covered this. Tim Miller, if you don't know, is a former Republican and now a never-Trumper. And I think it's interesting to get the perspective of people like Tim Miller on actual progressive candidates and progressive messages that we get so few of from Congress these days. So we're going to take a look at these clips from Tim Miller's show. I have my thoughts on this as well. Let's check it out together.
Hey guys, Tim Miller from the Bulwark here with managing editor Sam Stein. Bernie and AOC have been on just a barnstorm tour all over the Mountain West here. I'm in Arizona right now. And they had an event in Arizona that I want to talk about. They also were in my hometown, Denver. Massive event there in front of the Capitol. I think 30,000 people, they said, outside in downtown Denver. They also did an event up in Greeley. Doesn't smell that great in Greeley. It's a red district, but it's kind of like a swingy red district. And so,
what does it smell
like cow manure. Like they do a lot of, just a little too much industrial waste and farming. Yeah, up there in Greeley. It's definitely the worst smelling city in Colorado. We love you though, Greeley. If you're watching out there, no offense. It just is what it is. Sometimes you got to earn your flaw, own your weaknesses, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, AOC and Bernie, I wanted to just kind of bat around with you, what you think this means that they're drawing such big crowds, and then play a couple clips from the rallies. So what's your top line take?
Well, I mean, I think my top line take is objectively, they are tapping into something massive, right? Like 34,000 people in Denver is crazy. It's crazy. And, that's bigger than any crowd Bernie's had, on any of his presidential campaigns. And I think, I was talking to a Bernie person, and, what's interesting is that it's not just Bernie people signing up. Like they are checking their email list, and running that against the people who are signing up for these cards. And it wasn't like a direct correlation. These are new people who are registering. So people are, there's a huge appetite for any sort of resistance. Now, the other thing that I think is kind of interesting here is that, as this is happening, we can get to this after the clips. There's sort of this simultaneous weird coalition that's forming, with AOC and a bunch of kind of like what you and I would affectionately call centrist white dudes. It's like Connor Lamb and Tim Ryan are like coming up and be like, we love AOC.
And
like,
Bill Kristol.
Yeah. And it's like something, and there's like this, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves because who knows where this ends up, but there's like a weird coalition forming on the left, that at its core is just sort of like, fuck this shit. It's like the fuck this shit coalition. Like we just have to we've had enough. And it's bringing together this cross ideological, grouping. Now that could be powerful, right? Like you need that in a resistance here, because you can't have infighting. I don't know if it's sustainable, because of what we saw with, Schumer, 2 weeks ago, but, clearly the energy's there. It's now incumbent upon people like Bernie, AOC, and people beyond that, frankly, to figure out ways to tap into it. So that's my take.
Yeah, let's actually do hash that out before we get to the clips, because I think that's the interesting part of this. Dave Weigel, over at Sem4, has been on the ground at a lot of these events. And one of the interesting things that he was reporting was, just from kind of talking to people there, a lot of Bernie primary voters, right? Like the crowd was, Bernie's not just bringing out people that were for him in the 2016 and 2020 primaries, right? Like there are some new people coming out that are also young and progressive, but there are also some people coming up that are just Democrats, like that are not, that would have been for other people in those primaries, but are just looking for anybody.
Yeah. I bet there are a lot of apolitical people. I mean, I haven't been there, but I'd be very curious how many people just never were involved and just.
This is a really good point from Sam Stein, and this is what we've seen when Bernie Sanders ran in the past in 2016 and 2020. You had people like Sam Stein is saying here, apolitical people who they would have Donald Trump as their first choice and Bernie Sanders as their second choice. And I think that really comes down to right or wrong, but these were people thinking, well, this is somebody that's going to fight for me, even though they're completely different ideological viewpoints. And, the idea that Donald Trump is fighting for anybody other than himself and other billionaires is ludicrous, but people think that and thought that. And, AOC and Bernie Sanders teaming up with an actual progressive message, this is what the Democratic Party should be going after. They should be adopting this message, that the oligarchs are destroying us, because that's what the vast majority of the country understands is going on. But the problem is we have a Democratic Party establishment with people like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer who don't want to hear that message. But it is a winning message, and unless the Democrats adopt that, they're going to continue losing.
Just like, I need to tap into something. But go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. So I think that tells you that speaks to your point about this fuck this shit coalition. Like, I do think that there are people going out there that maybe are not fully on board with feeling the burn on every little element of his agenda, but they want somebody that is challenging this, that is speaking with passion, that is fighting. And I think that you add those people onto kind of the existing very real base of support that Bernie AOC have, and you start to get kind of these big crowds. So I think that is pretty notable. And like on the internet, a lot of times people want to like create like this. There's this tension that like we're like a lot of Democrats, especially people that were involved in 2016, like still can't get over the Bernie versus Hillary fight. And they're like power users and commentators, want to be like, oh, it has to be AOC or it has to be, whatever. And like a lot of regular people are just like, I don't know, like, if AOC and Bernie are the ones that are going to come to my town and rally and put up the fist, then I'll go out for AOC and Bernie. And that, and so I think that they are channeling this sort of anti-regime kind of anger that is out there in a lot. And I think other people could probably do it, maybe not with the same level of success because of Bernie's existing audience, but I think that other people, if they had that the same passion that these guys do, could also probably pull together big crowds right now.
Well, I think we need to remember that, like, in 2017, like, the first thing that happened when Trump won was a massive rally, the pussy hats and all that stuff. And that just hasn't happened yet. But it doesn't mean that there isn't an appetite for people for that type of demonstration of disobedience. And I actually drove by this morning. I drove by my first Tesla rally. I just happened to drive by a Tesla factory.
Were those domestic terrorists out there protesting?
Yeah. No Molotov cocktails at this one, but a bunch of people who parked, hundreds of yards down the street and were walking with their signs and like had made it a point that Saturday to show up because they needed an outlet to show how pissed off they were. Like, and that's it. Like there are two outlets right now. There are Tesla protests, and there's like the random Bernie AOC mega rally. And there's just not enough outlets for people to demonstrate how pissed off and afraid, frankly, they are. And so I think when you see 34,000 people showing up in Denver, part of that is because Bernie and AOC have this inherent appeal and they have these lists and they can bring people out. But frankly, a lot of it is just sort of like pent up frustration that people need to figure out a way to get out of their systems. And I think what an indictment of the Democrats to this point is they haven't been able to organize anything quite like that on an institutional level. Maybe it will happen, but it just hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, no, they're filling a big time void. Okay, I want to play two clips. One is kind of related to this failure of the Democratic establishment thus far. I mean, again, it feels like it's been forever, but it's been 2 months and 2 days since the inauguration somehow. So, I mean, Democrats have a little bit of time, but AOC spoke to this exact, weakness.
Just to be clear, that means we're 124th in. Is that it? Yeah,
I can't do the math live. Then the lethargy of the Democrats, particularly Chuck Schumer. Here is AOC right here in Arizona about a day ago.
This isn't just about Republicans either. We need a Democratic Party that fights harder for us too. But that means, here's what that means. That means our communities, each and every one of us, choosing and voting for Democrats and elected officials who know how to stand for the working class. And Tempe, I want to give you your flowers for a second, because you all have been working overtime to make that happen. In fact, one thing I love about Arizonans is that you all have shown that if a U.S. Senator isn't fighting hard enough for you, you're not afraid to replace her with one who will and win. And that's how you got two fantastic senators in Mark Kelly and Ruben Gallego.
So a cheeky point there, where she's talking about Kristen Sinema, obviously, and how the Democrats got rid of her, replaced her with Ruben Gallego, who we interviewed a couple of weeks ago, who's been a much spunkier, more committed anti-MAGA Democrats than Kristen Sinema, to say the least. And so, and she specifically says, like, it's not just Republicans. Like, I'm here, we're out here because we're upset at what Republicans are doing, the way they're going around the law, the way they're hurting people, the way they're trampling on free speech. But also it's like the Democrats got to step up to the plate here. And so, like, there's a little bit of subtext about maybe how AOC might be challenging Chuck Schumer, and making this kind of parallel to Arizona. But, a little, she knew what she was doing, I guess is my point.
Of course she did. And then, of course, like, she went after John Fetterman online.
Yeah.
Like, a little bit after that, Fetterman had gone after her, sorry. And then she responded to Fetterman. We've all gone through this. It's the Tea Party thing, and I don't know, whatever. But it is true that she knows, and it's very apparent that there's like real frustration among the base of Democratic voters over how Schumer and Fetterman have conducted themselves. And it's just, again, it comes back to this idea that, like, it's not really ideological, right? Like, I don't actually think like there's that much of a gap between AOC and Schumer. There is, obviously, but I think it could be overstated. It's really comes down to attitudinal, and they want to see at least some sort of fight. And I know that's an incredibly vague term, and I'm kind of curious what it would look like in her definition. But, everyone wants to see people stand up to Trump. And I think part of that's not just because they've watched Schumer say, no, we need to fund the government. It's because they've seen Columbia University be like, yeah, we'll bend over and have you look and administer our Middle Eastern studies programs because we don't want to lose money. They've seen Paul Weiss and other big firms being like, no, we will do all these contortions to make sure that we're not extorted.
I want to stop here because I think they're getting a bit into the weeds. If you want to watch the whole video, you can check it out on the Bulwark channel with Tim Miller and Sam Stein. What AOC is saying is very important, that when you have these bad members of Congress, these bad senators like Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, Democrats need to come together to primary them and replace them with good candidates. Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin were just in the Senate to enrich themselves. They weren't, and I know much more about Joe Manchin than I do Kyrsten Sinema, but they didn't want to do anything to help their states, at least in terms of Joe Manchin. He was there to enrich himself. And I believe Kyrsten Sinema, that was her motivation as well. And, you're seeing this on the right where they're going to primary Republicans that don't go along in lockstep with MAGA. And, they've got they have Elon Musk and all of his billions of dollars to do that. But on the left, we need that same thing happening but to try to get good progressive things through rather than horrible MAGA policies through. And it's just such a shame that AOC is young, but it's such a shame that Bernie Sanders is as old as he is, because I was just reading over the weekend about people talking about an AOC Bernie ticket, which we really need, but Bernie is just so old, I don't know that it could ever happen. But we need more of the Democratic Party adopting this message of AOC and Bernie Sanders about truly fighting against the oligarchs and MAGA. Let me know in the comments how you feel about all of this, how you feel about what Sam Stein and Tim Miller had to say, as well as this tour that AOC and Bernie Sanders are on. This is Chris on Culture, and I will see you in the next video.